So your current technologies are out of balance with that natural rhythm. They're disharmonious. And you'll start to work with different technology that's based more on the frequencies that are harmonious with Mother Earth. And when you start to do that, you'll find that you all have better health, you have better well-being. The plants, the animals also will thrive as you start to work with technology that supports the growth and the expansion of all life on the planet.
If you had a mouthpiece to every single world leader right now, where would you tell them to listen more deeply?
Well, we don't want the focus to go to the world leaders. We want the focus to go to each and every one of you. You have to understand your own power, each and every one of you. And as you start making vibrational selections, those in power will start to be a vibrational match for what the collective is asking for. And if that individual is incapable of doing that, then somebody else will step into that position.
Wendy Kennedy, welcome back on Just Tap In. What are you most excited about right now globally and in your life?
Oh, well, first, thank you for having me back. It's always a joy to be able to connect with you. I think the thing that's exciting me the most is seeing how many people are awakening, tuning in, kind of starting to channel for themselves, ask bigger questions. So that's really exciting. And I feel like everybody's getting an upgrade right now. And I definitely feel that for me. There's new energy coming in. I'm not quite sure which direction things are going to head, but I definitely know that there's something new coming. So that's exciting.
Mm. And when you say upgrades, what are you referring to there?
Downloads of packets of information. It's interesting. Maui is a really special place for me. And every single time I've gone to Maui, I've gotten kind of an upgrade. I've connected with new beings. My work has shifted, slightly, sometimes a little more dramatically, other times. But there's always something that happens on that land there. And, I think part of it is that Lemurian energy. And, we were talking before we started, I was just out in Mount Shasta for 9 days. And that's another place that, holds that Lemurian energy. And I started accessing more of those records and working with some of the beings there. And so there's new information, I think, that's becoming available for all of us. And I think we're going to hear more and more about Lemuria here because, I was asking the guides about this, and as we go through this process of integration, we kind of have to work our way back. So we started up in higher vibrational civilizations and kind of came down, and Lemuria was one of those higher civilizations. So we had to clear out some of our Atlantean trauma before we could get back up to that level of the Lemurian information. And I think we're getting there. So more of us are accessing that, having memories of that, living in a world that works more with feminine energy, looks and feels like. So to me, that's exciting. And I'm looking forward to see what unfolds over the next year or two.
You've told me before that your lifetime from Atlantis is the one that's impacted this lifetime the most. And what you're saying here is that we've had the opportunity to clear those traumas and those past whatever happened in Atlantis in order to then go up to other civilizations and remember those information packets from Lemuria, for example.
Yep.
What do you feel was cleared from that lifetime in Atlantis, and maybe things that we're collectively clearing that is allowing us to then go into these deeper states and remember civilizations such as Lemuria?
I think some of it is just healing the issues that were unresolved, but there are issues that we play out in the day to day, whether that's having better boundaries, processing guilt or grief or shame or blame, a sense of loss, connection. I think all of these things we play out here and now, but they were heightened for many of us in that time frame of Atlantis. So as we start to integrate, we work with that, we deal with that here and now, then, we're able to really put those records back in a neutral position where they belong, because all of the records from all lifetimes exist within our energetic field. And we partition off the ones that we don't really need to access for this lifetime, but the ones that are in resonance with the patterns that we're recreating here, we have access to. And when we start to vibrate in alignment with one of those issues, maybe it's boundaries. We don't have healthy boundaries. Where that exists within the ancestral field, where anyone in your genetic line has been working on that, or whether we have experienced in other lifetimes, those begin to vibrate in resonance. And so that amplifies the volume. So it intensifies. And sometimes we have these experiences where we feel like, on a logical level, on a scale of 1 to 10, my emotional reaction should have been maybe a 1 or 2, but it was a 6 or a 7. And sometimes it's because these records are vibrating and intensifying what we're feeling. And so as we learn to deal with it here and now, and we stop judging, we stop holding on to those programs of lack, limitation, and separation. And that's what the guides call integration. So as we begin to integrate the lessons, and really, if you think about it as a judgment, something is good, bad, right, or wrong, we want to make ourselves separate from the other half when we do that. So when they talk about integration, they're literally meaning bringing that back into your perception of the whole, that is valid. It's an expression of source energy. And when you do that, you're able to flow more source energy through your body. So when you put those, when you stop vibrating in resonance with a frequency, those records that were also vibrating begin to stop and they go back to a neutral position. And, sometimes people talk about it in terms of cutting cords with the past, or, we've healed that lifetime. But really what we're doing is healing this lifetime and putting everything back into balance in its proper position where it's supposed to be. We can't be disconnected from anything. So the idea of cutting a cord to heal, the guides say that can cause problems for us down the line, because then we start to trigger our programs of disconnection. So instead of running a lot of energy and creating a thick cord, what we're doing is kind of letting the energy dwindle, and then it goes back to kind of a gossamer thread that we have running through everything, our connection to everything. So we're really writing everything and putting it back into its divine position.
And once one of those records returns to that state of neutrality, what shifts can we experience in this personal life that after that neutralization, what can occur after that?
Well, really, we're making the shift within ourselves. And so then it stops vibrating, but the shift has happened within us. Mm-hmm. And we start to flow again, because when you hold judgment towards something, you have an attachment or an aversion, you stay in a loop with that thing, because the universe wants to bring you a reflection to say, hey, you need to bring this back into a perception of inclusion. You need to integrate it, and you're not seeing it. So we're going to give you that thing that needs to be integrated until you get it. And this is why sometimes in the process of manifestation, people are really frustrated, because they're like, I'm thinking about that thing that I want, but it's just not showing up. I keep getting that thing I don't like. And that's because they're going towards that thing they want to avoid the negative. So you're still hooked into that judgment. But if you can acknowledge that thing that you were previously judging is valid, doesn't mean you have to go and explore it. And it's fine where it is, but you're not trying to push it away. You're not trying to make it separate. You're including it in all that is. Then you can move towards that thing that you want out of a state of curiosity, not I have to have this because I don't want that over there. And that's what allows you to stay in flow. And that's also what allows you to stay in resonance, so that you're a vibrational match for that thing that you want to create. Mm.
There's this legend that you remember when Atlantis fell, of the 12 tribes heading in 12 different directions with wisdom and knowledge that they, in a way, encoded for a time when humanity would be ready to uncover those packets of information. Do you remember exactly, in that sense, what is coming up to the surface from that time of the 12 tribes and why they split up in the first place?
I think it was so that the knowledge could be saved around the world. And it was also placed in energetic centers to hold a resonance on the planet. So I think today you'll find that more people are traveling to sacred sites. And this is why they're drawn to those sacred sites and why they're sacred sites, because this information was held and shared with the local people at the time to try to bring civilization back up. But as far as the exact 12 locations off the top of my head, I wish I could remember exactly where they were, but I think we're at a time where people are walking the land again to take on those records so they can access it. And if you're somebody who can't travel, you can also project and imagine connecting with the land there and accessing the records that you need. But there is also something very special, as you know, about walking that land that you may have walked before. It can trigger memories in you. Sometimes even if you listen to somebody talk about being in those locations, it can activate that in you. And I think that's happening right now so that we can let go of all that stuff, but also so that we can start to access some of the gifts, gifts, and abilities that we had during those times. What was that like to have the ability to heal ourselves, from within? What was that like to know that while you were embodied, not just a theory, but to actually walk that and have that ability? And we can start tapping into that information.
Before today's transmission, I wanted to take a minute to let you in on something that could change your life. If you've been doing the inner work and still feel like you're walking this path alone, you're not the only one. Most spiritual spaces give you endless content to consume, but not a tribe to grow with. That's why we created The Deep Dive, a living spiritual ecosystem designed to help you grow in community, rhythm, and real embodiment. Right now, our members are embarking on a journey exploring a core spiritual and practical teaching through daily activations, live community gatherings guided by me and our facilitators, and also participating in sacred challenges that are designed to help you live your practice and bring it to life. You'll be surrounded by seekers and leaders who've decided that they're done doing this work in isolation. If you're ready to find your people, visit the link in the description or scan the QR code on screen right now, and I'll see you inside. When you mentioned in our last conversation that you remember being in Egypt and encoding these crystals with information, leaving them in a multidimensional space underneath the Sphinx, that triggered something for me. So to go a little bit deeper into that, what else came up when you were around that huge structure next to the pyramids that looks like a lion, almost a time capsule in that way? If we were storing information down there, what came up for you when you first had those realizations?
It's interesting. The more powerful experience for me was when I first got there before we'd gone to the plateau. Because when we were there was so much going on and we had private access, but we were late getting there. And, I was with a group and there was so much happening that I didn't feel like I really got a chance to ground and center. And I think I had the reaction and kind of the recall that I needed probably a week before that. But for me, the more powerful experience I had was actually at Abydos. And that's triggered more memories for me in terms of working with frequency and light and angles. And I remember being there 152,000 years ago and working there and helping to kind of set some things up and working with resonance and frequency there. But I think one of the things I got from being there was finally to put some of that to rest, to let go of some of the grief, some of the heaviness that I had been carrying around in my memories of Atlantis, and just to appreciate more of the beautiful side of it instead of kind of the heavy last days.
Hmm. The Pleiadian collective that you channel, they also say that they work a lot with tone and sound. I'm curious to know if there's any parallels there of what you learned about resonance, sound, frequency, with the way that the P's come through and also work with those technologies.
Well, definitely, I think working with harmonics and overtones, looking at the geometry of things and how that impacts frequency. So, this is not really my area of forte in this life. For whatever reason, my brain can't really wrap around all of it. Like I can't hang on to it.
A lot of math.
Yeah, well, it's funny because I'm actually pretty good at math, but for whatever reason, I guess I'm not meant to go down that path with mathematics and music and all of that. I wish I could retain more of that information. So I get hits and bits and pieces in the moment. But it's all interconnected. Everything that exists in nature has this basic structure. And when we start to see the patterns, whether you're looking at it at the level of sound, whether you're looking at the level of geometry, this is why the ancients, we see things built the way that they are in scale to the planet and in alignment with certain things, because they understood the patterns that repeat throughout the entire universe, and that puts us in natural rhythm, natural balance. So I think part of what I was getting while I was there was kind of a remembrance of that. And sometimes the remembrance of alignments with different systems, and especially with the Great Pyramid, with the alignment with Orion and Sirius, and being able to communicate in stronger ways when we were in certain alignments, and the frequencies were amplified that we could receive, not only for direct communication, but the archetypal patterns and the lessons and the wisdom that come from those systems, our ability to tap in and access that knowledge and information in an easier way. It's not that we can't at other times. It just is much easier at certain times.
And since 2019, the P's have stated that we've been in this sort of war of the frequencies, and that this time period or window would last until 2026, which is coming right around the corner. I wanted to ask you what you've perceived about where we're at with these war on frequencies, and how that's playing out in the collective and the mainstream, what we're seeing really as the spiritual work that we're doing. What have you read into in that aspect?
Well, I definitely think more things are coming to light for people to see. We can start to see the repeated patterns to say something's not working here. Something seems a little off. So, that's interesting to see. I think we have, it's not at the beginning of 26. I think we have all the way through 2026. But I think, what they say when we get to the summer of 2026, we start to see kind of a light at the end of the tunnel. So right now, from my ego perspective, I'm like, how is that going to happen? That's a very short time frame. But then I think back to how quickly things have been changing, and more information comes out. So I think this is a time for people to go a little deeper. I think there's more certainly happening on the planet in terms of our discoveries and things that we are finding from ancient civilizations that are coming to light now, with the new technology that they've been using to scan the Giza Plateau, and that they can use on other places around the world, that information can't be suppressed in the same way that it once was. So that's exciting to see. And I think people are really thinking about it more, like, what do I want, and how do I want to live, and how do I want to be, and what do I need to do within myself, and what can I do to contribute to that vision that I want to see. And it's not so much always fighting the old, because that just keeps us in that loop and keeps us at the same vibrational level instead of elevating above what we've created in the recent past. And I think that's sometimes hard for people to really get a hold of. And I think they're starting to see that. It's like, well, we've already done this. How many times are we going to do this? It's another war. It's another, we need to come at this from another way. And I think people are starting to get it.
And even the word war itself, it almost implies that there's an opposing force on the other side of that. At what point do you feel that we'll realize that it's not about an opposing force that is here to limit us, block us, or whatever, but instead of working with ourselves, being the mirrors of the external reality, to not even be on that resonance of war, of fighting, of restraint. When do you feel we'll come to those realizations that it really does start within?
I'm hoping soon. But, I think there are more people who are getting that, who are starting to see that. More people, just at a very base level, a generic level, there are more people meditating than ever. 20 years ago, that was not a common thing. It was not a very mainstream thing. Certainly, it was a little more fringe 30 years ago. So that's a very short amount of time to see such a massive shift in just a general practice of people understand the benefits of doing something as simple as meditating, grounding and connecting with the earth. And so I think there are more people who are getting that. And I don't think it takes everybody to wake up, to make change. I think it takes a relatively small percentage of us to make a massive impact, because then that growth is exponential. I think people get it really quickly. They feel it. They go, oh, yes, this I want. I want this. What's happening over here? How do I get that? And I think we're seeing more of that.
And when we talk about this time frame, you've said that the next stage of our development is remembering that we're part of a galactic community. So there's been recent developments on that, more people, and there's more information coming out to the mainstream on that end of the spectrum. But I wanted to ask you also, how does this short little time frame that we have until the end of 2026 get influenced by us getting reintroduced to this galactic community, to this galactic family that we're a part of?
I think it radically shifts our perspective, our place in the universe. The things that we squabble about, we realize these are not the biggest issues that we really have. And then we start asking bigger questions like, well, how did you get here? And, how did you structure your civilization, and how do you heal, and understanding, how these beings work with energy. So, when you start talking about free energy, that changes everything on this planet, because our whole economic system is tied to energy. So that alone changes why we work, how we work, the cost of goods and things like that. The guides say we'll still have a monetary system, because that's always a big question for people, because we're not quite ready to give up conditional exchange. Even barter is the same thing as money. I'll give you this for that. But they say probably in about 70 years, we'll be to a point where that will be eradicated, because we're moving to a space where we're just living from the heart, and we're being of service and knowing that our needs will be met. We're not worrying about where that's going to come from, which is a radically different mindset. And they say it'll take a while for us. That's kind of one of the last things to go. But we're certainly working towards that and moving towards that.
What do you mean when you say free energy?
Energy that, we're not digging for oil. We're not using natural gas in the same way. We're using 0 point energy.
Is that technology that these galactic civilizations have tapped into, that maybe they're wanting to share with our civilization?
I think it's tricky because a lot of the beings who will show up are really looking out for our best interest. And so they're not going to share information that we maybe aren't quite ready for. Some of them are waiting for us to come along a little bit, mature a little bit, but that's certainly questions that we're asking. And I do think that technology already exists on the planet. I think it's been suppressed by big corporations in order to make money and stay in control. So, I think at this point, there's so many people who are waking up and starting to remember their true divine nature and starting to access more information from the higher realms, that more people are being inspired and getting this information, and it's going to be harder and harder to suppress. So even if these beings don't show up, it's something that I think people are exploring, they want to know more about. And so it's going to start to come out. But I do think, from what the guides tell me, that there will probably be some sort of disclosure and connection that will kind of radically shift humanity's perspective. And we're having subtle connection right now on the one-on-one level. You know, we go out and we do CE5 events and things like that. We're seeing lights in the sky. And that's a nice place to start for most of us. We're having telepathic communication. It doesn't absolutely shatter our perspective of reality, which I think would be very different if you had a being that looked nothing like you standing in front of you and seeing that being the same way that I'm seeing you. So that at that point, you can't put the genie back in the bottle. And I think it radically shifts your perspective of reality.
Yeah. Well, even for you, you know, back in the 90s when you started having these visions and then slowly getting into the channeling world, how did that change your perspective of reality? However radical or subtle it was, how did it happen for you?
I think for me, it was a bit more subtle because I was always, even as a child, drawn to UFOs and ghosts, the paranormal, and Egypt, Atlantis, those stories. So for me, it was just kind of a continuation of my curiosities as a child. I don't have recollection of necessarily things happening in my childhood. Now looking back, as I start to channel and access memories, it's like, oh, this happened then, but I have no direct memory of those things happening to me when I was little. But I think I did have interactions when I was little. So for me, it was kind of a subtle, natural progression. I didn't feel like I had the rug pulled out from under me or anything like that. I didn't have a high drama situation.
What about for the people around you when you finally started to do this work publicly? What was that like?
I had a lot of support. I think, for me, I was very lucky. When I first started to tell my friends, I said, I know this sounds insane, but I feel like I'm supposed to be doing this channeling thing. I don't know what it is exactly. I don't know anybody who does it. I know I'm supposed to be doing it. And they were curious people, and they were like, well, if you manage to figure it out, I'll be your guinea pig. And so in that way, I was very lucky. And my brother had already been on a spiritual path and had been meditating and been to ashrams and, visited with the Sufis. And so it was a natural conversation for us. My parents, I waited about a year to tell them, but they were both open and receptive. And, they've been incredibly supportive to me over the years. So I was very lucky to have a lot of support.
And it's funny because when I'm out and about in my regular life and I'm at the gym and I see a friend from high school and he asks me what I'm doing, I kind of have to probe it in the sense of like, how much are you in this world and how much can I reveal? So there's almost like two ways that you can say what you do. One to people who are completely new to this, and one with people that have been on this path for decades. What are the two differences between the ways that you explain what you do with channeling and light language to those different perspectives?
Yeah, well, I live in the South, so when I first got here, and it has changed in the 5 years I've been here, but a lot of people are very steeped in their religious beliefs, and so if I knew that was their background and I could feel it, I would just say that I work in personal development. It was kind of a nice way, or I'd say I'm intuitive. And normally the first place everybody goes with that is, oh, you're a psychic, or, oh, you talk to dead people, or, well, not exactly. And it just depends, honestly, the space that I'm in, how deep I want to go to explain things or not. Sometimes I'll tell people, I work with people's guides. I work with my own guides from different star systems. And I help people understand, what challenges they have so they can live happier lives. And I think people can get that. If I know you're into metaphysics, then I just let you know I channel. I work with the Pleiadians. So it's a different conversation.
So what is that deepest explanation that you've given someone about the work that you're bringing through for humanity?
For someone who doesn't understand this
No,
world, or
the
somebody who's,
deepest. No, someone
oh,
that's, in this world, like wakes up drinking a metaphysical poem.
well, I think I'm here to bring through messages of empowerment. I think that's kind of the bottom line with the work that I do with the guides. They very much want you to learn how to do this for yourself, how to look at your stuff, how to recognize where you're vibrating, how to learn how to recognize subtle energy. Because once we learn how to read subtle energy, we can open up the entire universe. It's like somebody teaching you how to read a book as a child. First you learn the alphabet, and then when you get that, then you put the letters together and you get the sentences. And then once you learn how to read a sentence, you can go to the library and check out any book on any topic of information that you want. So, that's what we're learning to do here. But that starts first with learning what that frequency feels like in your own energy field and in your body. And once you gain mastery over that, then you can go into the Akashic records and learn about anything that you want. And you can connect with any kind of being that you want. As you set an intention, I'd like to work with some beings from this star system who can fill me in on this, that, or the other. Or you can go into the Akashic realm and look at that. But you've got options and what you want to access. But you have to start first by looking at your own stuff. Where am I holding programs of lack and limitation and separation that won't allow me access to my heart center? Or, well, you have access to your heart center at any given time, but it's where's my focus? Is it in the limiting stuff, or is it in the heart center space where I can access multidimensional information? So it's learning how to recognize that and keep coming back to that expanded space in the heart.
Have you noticed a tipping point in people that once they get over this hurdle, they learn to read subtle energy, more fluently than the English language itself?
I think we're getting there. And even for me, I have to really stop and kind of check in. After 30 years still, I recognize things pretty quickly. Doesn't mean I always want to move out of frequencies. I maybe like, I just don't feel like going and meditating right now, or I don't feel like doing some of the clearing exercises I know to do, and I'll go do something else, and then I'll get bored. And I'll be like, okay, I'm tired of being in this energy. And so I'll go do what I know I need to do. So I think all of us are kind of getting there. But there's definitely a faster pace that people are going at. They're waking up and recognizing energy faster than they used to, for sure.
Mm-hmm. And when we say recognizing energy, because I'm looking at it from my own personal lens, does it mean to feel more than we think in that sense? Like putting the emotion, the feeling before the logical mind takes over and tries to explain away whatever we're experiencing in the moment? Or is it something much deeper?
Well, I think it's both. So it's recognizing the frequency of your thoughts. What's the quality of your thought? Is it positive? Is it negative? Are you attached to something? And then what emotions are surfacing? We've been taught to stuff down all of our emotions, which is why I think at this point people are having all these emotional outbursts because they've suppressed it for so long. They're just reaching a saturation point. And it's, in terms of the thoughts, you have to go into the heart-centered space to access the high mind. And that's really where we want to go. And in that space, that's where it's more like pure logic. You can look at things objectively, and you're not attached to one extreme or another. I think when we get into the ego mind and the thoughts, it's like, oh, well, this is a good choice, and this is how I have to do it because this will keep me safe. So it's a different system. But you have to go, like I said, into the heart-centered space. And that's as easy as thinking of something that makes you smile, working with the frequencies of compassion, unconditional love. That's kind of a harder one for most of us. But compassion and gratitude, those are probably two of the easier ones for us to access because those aren't polarized in the same way. And that will help us to access the heart-centered space so that we can access the high mind.
What is a frequency that you noticed that the Pleiadians get more into when they're working with you? Do you notice a prevalent frequency that they work at, that they inhabit most often?
Well, definitely compassion. I think they're pretty compassionate. They can be pretty playful too. So
Mm.
they have a pretty good sense of humor. And it's interesting sometimes online when I do events, you don't notice that as much. But when they have a large group and the energy, and they can play with that energy in the group in a live setting, they've got a really good sense of humor. But they're very, very compassionate and loving, kind. So those are the frequencies I feel when I connect with them.
Mm. You can definitely feel it when you're with them. And they even told us last time that we forgot how to play and how to be in an adventurous state. So really it just goes to show that they're teaching us a lot. And we're also, I would believe that we're teaching them as well. And have you ever asked them what humanity has taught them about their species, their evolution, their growth?
Yeah, compassion is one for sure. Grace is another. Because we have the ability here, because we've embodied such heavy frequencies, that we have a really amazing understanding of just what some of those lower frequencies are, so that when somebody else is struggling, we have a lot of compassion for those people. Say, I know what you're going through. I've been there. That's really hard. And it's not quite the same thing for them because they're not embodied and they haven't walked in a human body experiencing that. So it's not going to be the same for them. And so we have access to a bandwidth of compassion, an intensity of compassion, if you want to say it that way, that they don't have. And they say that's why, as we go through this ascension process, that's our gift to the universe, because we are able to access it in such a strong way, having been to those depths. All of us, maybe not at the scale that some other people on the planet, maybe they've had a really rough life and they've had lots of loss, but most of us at some level have had a loss. So we know what the frequency feels like, maybe just not the intensity of what somebody else has experienced. But when we connect with them, we can have a great deal of compassion for them because of that.
Is compassion, would you say, the highest frequency that we can access in human bodies?
I think unconditional love probably is. I think that's also very hard right now where we're at sometimes, because we have so many programs of lack, limitation, and separation. And when we start to go into that unconditional space, anything like it wants to be integrated. And so it may start to vibrate, to transmute. We'll catch it and our focus shifts out of the heart, out of that space of unconditional love, and then back into those programs of lack, limitation, and separation. So it's a constant process of moving back and forth between the operating system of the heart, where that unconditional love is, and the ego mind, where all those programs of lack, limitation, and separation are. So we're getting there. We're working on it more and more. Hopefully every time we go into the heart space, we stay there longer, we go higher. And every time we drop out, we don't drop out as far and we don't stay there as long. We begin to recognize, ooh, I've dropped out. I'm not in that space. I'm worrying. I'm going down the rabbit hole, and I need to come back to the present moment. And we get better at doing that.
Mm. Wendy, I would love to hold space for you to bring through the P's, if that's something that you feel called to do today, and ask them a few questions about what we've touched on here and there in the conversation, and just expanding beyond that to see what else wants to come through.
Yes, I'd love to. All right. So I will just say this, for those who haven't experienced them, they're a group of 2,500 beings of light. They don't have physical form, and they actually work with tone and sound, which is why their dialect is different than my own. It's not really any one particular dialect. It's really open vowels that they can modulate the frequency, and that helps to move energy. So
it's not an Australian accent.
No, it's kind of it's not any one particular accent. In the beginning, it sounded way more British, and then at some point it went way to the other end and sounded way more Australian or New Zealand. And used muscles in my mouth that I never used. And I'm like,
your
okay.
face is hurting afterwards.
It did. And I was like, okay, and then, now it's kind of a blend of everything. So it's not any one particular dialect. And people always ask, where are you from? I'm from Kansas. All right. So I'll get out of the way and let them come in.
Awesome.
Yes. Hello, dears. This is the Ninth Dimensional Pleiadian Collective, and it is a pleasure and an honor to have the opportunity to connect with you. So we enjoyed listening to the conversation, and we learn a great deal from you. Let us just tell you firsthand that we learn a tremendous amount from you, your resilience, the internal strength that you have, your drive for connection to better yourselves is there. And we know sometimes you forget that, but on the level of the whole, you all embody those frequencies. You all get up every morning, even in the hardest of times, and put another foot forward. And so you are always striving, maybe sometimes not at the pace that you would like to see yourself moving forward and growing and expanding, but you have an inner strength that's just undeniable. And not all species have this. You are incredibly creative, and you think in amazing and unique ways, things that we would never think of doing. Solutions to challenges, ways of creating, whether you're talking about engineering or whether you're talking about art. You all have access to the genetic wisdom from thousands of worlds. And so you homogenize all of that information, you synthesize it, and you start creating in amazing ways because of that. And we learn from you. And the entire universe learns from your creativity as well. Sometimes your creativity is in the challenges that you create for yourself. And we stand back and we say, look at that. Look how they set that challenge up for themselves. Well, that was quite unique. We wouldn't have even thought of that. And the interesting thing for you all to remember here is that when you come up against a challenge, or the way that you like to think of it as a problem, that something has happened, you've also created the solution at the same time. It's just in a different vibratory range. And so you have to adjust your internal vibration to match that frequency in order to perceive it in your external world. So that's something that we want you all to remember. Whenever you're challenged, you've already created the solution. It's not that you've got to go figure it out. It's about you putting yourself in vibrational alignment with the solution energy, and that's done by going into the heart-centered space. The challenge is created through the ego mind at that vibrational level of lack, limitation, and separation. The solution is in the heart center, where you know that you are one with all that is, and that will allow you access to the higher vibrational expression of that dualistic experience. You live in a dualistic reality. It's a dualistic universe. And so both sides of the polarity are created at the same time. Think about the coin being made. You have a positive side and a negative side. They're both created at the same time. All right. So you always have access to that. You just have to go inside to reorganize your frequency.
Thank you so much, Peace, for being here. I had a bit of a metaphysical question about frequencies and really in what ways they emerge within ourselves and within civilizations and species. For example, you were mentioning how humanity is able to tune into these frequencies of resilience, inner strength, and creativity. Where are these frequencies forged in that sense? Is it through the experiences we have in this physical realm, or are they part of the creator source energy? How are these frequencies birthed so that, a conscious being like ourselves can experience them?
So they are part of source energy. They're already in existence. All things are in existence, past, present, and future. All of it's there. So it's about you going through discovery. But what you all also have here is connection. with other humans. And we know that sounds a little strange right now on your planet because at this period you feel probably more disconnected than you've ever felt. But it runs so strongly through humanity, this sense of compassion and this desire, this natural desire for you to want to be of service to others, that when you get out of those ego programs, that's the first thing you all want to do. The moment you go back to that heart-centered space, that's the natural drive of your species. What has happened to keep you socially conditioned and out of that empowerment is that you have been socially engineered to believe things about yourself that keep you in lack, limitation, and separation. You're not enough. You don't have enough. You're not deserving. On and on and on about your marital status, your weight, your sexual orientation, your financial situation. You've been focused, all right? You've had people trying to direct your focus to those programs of lack, limitation, and separation, which keep you focused on the outside and not on the inside. But when you do go into that internal space, you are exceptionally powerful. And your natural drive is connection and to be of service. That's a strong drive for your species. It is encoded in your DNA. And so it's a fine line that some of these beings who are trying to control and manipulate reality have to walk. Oh, we can't go too far because if we create too much of a natural disaster or a big event, then people are going to have a lot of compassion in response and want to be of service and to help those in need. You see this on your planet. So it's a very fine line to create enough disruption without triggering everybody else into the natural state of compassion and connection. And we're going to work on connection. We're going to do a language of light activation as we get to the end here to help with that. And we'll also do one for integration to help you to let go of some of these attachments and aversions to things so that you move out of the ego mind and back into the heart center. So do we answer your question? We know we went off on a bit of a tangent.
No, definitely. And I wanted to ask you there because we started off with Wendy talking about the Lemurian civilization and how a lot of that information and encoding is coming back to us right now. I'm curious to know, what did the Lemurians understand about compassion and unconditional love that allow them to shape their systems and their societies back in that time period?
Well, there were several highs and lows in the Lemurian civilization. So you'd have a rise and a fall, and then it would rise again, just as it did with Atlantis. But in the early days, there were beings who stepped down in frequency. They remembered their divine nature. They knew what it meant to be one with all that is. And then slowly over time, they came through the dissension process. And so they stopped accessing that quite as much. But there was a period in the high civilizations of Lemuria where they knew without a shadow of a doubt, they were connecting with beings in other star systems. They knew their stellar origins, where many of these beings who decided to make Earth their home, where they originally came from, where their stellar roots were, and the programs and the belief systems and the lessons of those systems. And they knew that they were coming here to be a part of an experiment, as it were, so that they could lower their resonance. And, the game is to see how far can we go into density, forget who we are, and can we come back out? And that's what you're remembering right now. So they understood the importance of balance and unity. They understood the importance of both the divine feminine and the divine masculine. Right now, you all are using the lower form of both of those energies. What will come back online first is the divine feminine, because the feminine always comes first in a linear perceived reality. In the higher realms where past, present, and future are one, both the feminine and the masculine work in unison at the same time. But here where you are, first the divine feminine will come back online, and then the divine masculine, the divine action, if you will. So a lot of the action that you take right now on the planet is driven out of fear. Oh, I've got to control things. I've got to manipulate things to get this to be this way or that way. So you have to start first with the inner divine feminine And then you move into the inner divine masculine. Then that moves into the outer divine feminine and the outer divine masculine. It's always, first and foremost, an inside job. And this is part of what the Lemurians understood. They understood compassion. They understood grace and ease. And they understood working with this form, loving and appreciating this form, and being able to connect with nature. How it was their responsibility to be a steward for the planet. And that kind of fell by the wayside over time. So we're here to remind you of your next assignment, which is to be a steward for the planet, to take care of all life on this planet. But you've got to find balance within in order to step into that role.
What do you believe would change right now on our planet if humanity would be able to go more into that divine feminine state and take action from the divine masculine aspects? What could we see as a shift as a result of just that shift in the way that we're doing things, in the way that we're acting, the way that we're being?
Well, it would change everything. The feminine is the nurturing energy. And right now, all of you in almost all ways need to be nurtured. You need to nurture and take care of yourselves, to recharge yourselves, to honor your bodies, and learning how to recognize the subtle energy that the body is displaying, telling you, oh, I need more sleep, or, oh, I need this nutrient, or, oh, I need to move more. So it's learning to tune in with that. But on a bigger scale and a grander scale, a lot of it's about listening. And you'll be able to listen and hear and receive information where others are struggling, where they may have an opinion, a desire for an end result, and you're listening to what they're really saying instead of being in a defensive posture saying, well, you can't have that because I need this over here. And if you have that, then I'm going to lose what I have. So you're able to be present in an unconditional space and allow someone to express themselves. And what you'll start to see is that at the end of the day, you all want the same things. You're not as different as you think you are. And sometimes all that is required is that you listen, because sometimes all people want is to be seen and heard. And then once they're seen and heard, then you can have a deeper conversation and decide, well, the things I thought I wanted, maybe they're not as important as I thought they were, and we can find some sort of compromise. That's what's missing on your planet right now. And this is the mindset that's needed in order to elevate above war. It's coming. You're getting there. You all are starting to learn to, again, read your internal energy signatures. And as you start to go in and spend more time in the heart-centered space and you start emanating that out, you'll start getting reflections back for that and having deeper conversations with people around you, and you'll start to get clear on your path, what it is that you need to know or do, and the actions that you need to take. But that starts first with the divine feminine and going inside.
If you had a mouthpiece to every single world leader right now, where would you tell them to listen more deeply in terms of the solutions that are just on the other side of the challenges that we've created for ourselves?
Well, we don't want the focus to go to the world leaders. We want the focus to go to each and every one of you, because all of you are trying to put your energy subtly into those at the top. And that's an old paradigm, the hierarchical paradigm. That's also what needs to go away. You have to understand your own power, each and every one of you. And as you start making vibrational selections, those in power will start to be a vibrational match for what the collective is asking for. And if that individual is incapable of doing that, then somebody else will step into that position. You're not going to be working in the old way. When you finally move into a higher space, you'll still have at the beginning governmental bodies, but these beings will not be seeking these positions. They will be asked to serve by those around them. And they will not be permanent positions the way that your politicians now have made careers of what they do. They will be temporary assignments and their area of expertise in different areas. So you'll have scientists, you'll have healers, you'll have those that work with energy, you'll have those that work with mathematics and arts. And so all will be represented, not just a small selection. It's a very different way of governing. And these councils will not be in power for long periods of time. These beings will rotate in and out. And again, all of your power starts within and from the grassroots. It's not trying to give your power away because you want your politician to do what you want them to do. That's not going to work. That's the old system. And you're building a new system. You've got to start by changing yourselves. And as enough of you change yourselves and what you desire to create in the world, then those old systems will start to change because the collective energy is shifting.
Where are we most out of alignment with universal and natural law?
It really has to do with your relationship with the planet, because your relationship with her will reflect more of that universal nature. So your current technologies are out of balance with that natural rhythm. They're disharmonious. And you'll start to work with different technology that's based more on the frequencies that are harmonious with Mother Earth. And when you start to do that, you'll find that you all have better health. You have better well-being. The plants, the animals also will thrive as you start to work with technology that supports the growth and the expansion of all life on the planet. So that's a big piece for you all, learning how to work more in balance with the natural frequencies of the planet, and then it all goes from there.
Our last conversation, you hinted at these new energies that we are moving into. In the terms of technology, you said that understanding harmonic resonances, sacred geometry, and the combination of earth elements with that to create biological interfaces for our technology. And with that, a lot of the old things for our monetary system will fall away. And with that, the control mechanism goes away as well. When you mean biological interfaces, what does that look like for us?
It's technology that we're not talking about putting technology in your bodies. All right. We're not talking about transhumanism because we're not real fans of that. That's a problem.
Why?
So, again, dear?
Why? Why is that a problem?
Because it changes your DNA. And your body is already divinely perfect. And it can alter it in a way that is not necessarily beneficial and not in harmony with your natural universal rhythm. So it can create a lot of problems. And there are species who've gone through this. If you look at the Greys, for example, they've gone down this path. And they got to such a point that they were more interested in the technology and the mental component of it all that they lost connection with their emotional being. And so that started to impact their ability to reproduce. This is why you have the hybrid projects on your planet. These beings are trying to learn how to connect with the emotional state of being so they're not so technologically oriented, externally oriented, so that they can start to access that divine spark once again. So when we talk about biological systems, we're talking about technology that utilizes the natural elements that are already in existence on your planet, whether that's chemical reactions that occur to produce energy, all right, in a more harmonious way. Technology, when you build it, most often what happens is that there is a force that gets used that is not in natural rhythm. All right. It gets the job done. It gets the result, but not in a way that's harmonious with everything else around it. When you start working with more of these biological systems, you are not excluding some of the natural rhythms and reactions and things that, frankly, you don't have a full understanding. Sometimes when you take vitamins, or certainly when you take pharmaceuticals, you don't understand all of the subtleties of the compounds in nature and how something that may have been removed in a pharmaceutical product and it still exists in nature is creating balance. But in the pharmaceutical product, you get a side effect because that thing that's naturally there that got removed because scientists didn't think that it was needed is the thing that kept you from having in nature the side effect. So it's understanding the synergistic nature of things. And that's where the biological technology comes in. It's more synergistic. Does that help answer the question?
Definitely. And you brought up the grays, which was really fascinating because I wanted to ask you there, do you see that the grays are future expressions of humanity if we did choose that timeline of merging with technology and the transhumanism sort of timeline, synthetic timeline?
Yes, you may have some break-off civilizations that actually go and explore that as a reality. And so there may be future versions of you that go and explore that. But the planet as a whole, we don't think is going to go down that pathway. But there may be more breakaway civilizations that will.
And what is the pathway that you feel would be most prevalent for this planet and for our species?
Well, one that allows you to be more in natural rhythm, all right, because that is the desired goal of the ascension process, to be more in alignment with one that all that is. So, that is our hope, and that is the wish that we hold, the vision we hold for you.
You mentioned last time that a lot of us have lost our sense of adventure and play. What would you advise? Because obviously being in these physical bodies, we can utilize the full spectrum of emotions and go out and explore those experiences. If you were in our human bodies right now, what would you do first and foremost to go on those adventures and return to the joy and the play?
Well, we know some of you think that you have to wait for an outside event to allow you to feel a particular way. And it's actually just the opposite. You have to generate the feeling first inside of you, pulse it out, then physical representations of that get reflected back to you, and it reinforces the original energy. You all think that the external determines the internal, but when you start to understand that it's first an inside job, then you don't have to wait for something to happen to make you feel better. You start thinking, what would it feel like to feel lighter in my body? What would it feel like to have a lovely evening out with friends? What would that feel like? And it is this imagination that gets the energy moving and gets it pulsed out to the universe. And then you have to be in a vibrational match in order to perceive it being reflected back to you. So you have to be able to sustain it. So if you sit down and you think that, it'd be amazing to go sit and have a coffee with a friend and have a great deep conversation. And then you start letting the ego mind take over and you start going, well, I don't have time, or I don't have the money to go out, and I don't know who would meet me. And so you've dropped out of that high resonance. So that opportunity comes back, but you can't even begin to perceive it because you're vibrating way down here. So you have to start paying attention to where your frequency is. So the more often you can imagine that being your experience, the higher you're going to be. You may go to that lower place, but you'll come back up. And again, the more you can sustain it, the more you have opportunity to perceive and experience it. So it's just about practice and repetition. But you've got to decide how you want to feel, not wait for something outside of you to perhaps allow you the opportunity to feel a particular way. That's working backwards. So you've got to take your power back and decide how you want to feel. This is happening a lot for many of you when you start looking at the news, you start looking at the things that are going on outside of you, and you are just reacting instead of deciding, oh, instead of feeling depressed and unhappy, I'd like to know what joy feels like. I'd like to know what connection feels like. And then imagining those, because you've had the experience in your body already. Might have been a while, but you've had the experience. So it's about deciding and generating that frequency so that you can have that materialize as your reflection in reality.
I've also noticed that there are moments when my body, and since I'm in a younger vessel, I'll have an experience of an emotion for the first time that, I'll give an example. I was at a Dr. Joe Dispenza retreat and my heart opened to a level that I've never experienced before. And that reset the baseline of the amount of love that I could feel. And just because I had that one experience, I could retune into it whenever I wanted to because my body already remembered it. So
yes,
it's very interesting that you say that.
You have sense memory. And if you have that kind of experience, you can say to yourself, I want to bookmark this. I want to remember what this feels like in my body. And it will make it much easier for you to go back to that frequency. But here's the thing. You felt that, but it probably hasn't been to that intensity or recently. All right. Because you felt more of that energy as a baby, as an infant, as a child. And then, you grew a little older. You started moving out of that heart-centered space and more into the ego programs. And it's been a while, so you may have forgotten it. But yes, you can turn the volume up and experience it in a more intense way. But you've had the experience. It is in there. And yes, now as an adult, you've had that. You can bookmark it and come back to it in any given moment.
And along those lines, is there a reason why our bodies sometimes get addicted to those painful feelings or feelings that don't really feel that good in our experience?
A lot of times because it's familiar. And you're afraid of stepping out into the unknown because there may be an even greater fear you have about perhaps being safe. I can feel uncomfortable and unhappy, but I'm safe. And on my hierarchy of needs, it's more important to be safe than to be happy. So sometimes it's how you have things wired. Does that make sense? Do you understand?
Yes, definitely. Definitely. One of the last questions I guess I had for you is, what is a question that you wish humanity would ask themselves more often?
Ooh, that's a good one. Probably just as simple as, where am I vibrating? What's coming up for me? Where are my thoughts? What emotions am I feeling? We wish you would all take some time to give yourself permission to observe that. Doesn't take long. And it doesn't take long for you to shift your energy field. For you to think of something that makes you smile, get in that heart-centered state, ground, imagine connecting with Mother Earth. And then choose a frequency. What do you want instead? Oh, I want to feel peace. What would peace feel in my body? What would that feel like? And then imagine that. And that starts to vibrate. The thing is, your body doesn't know the difference of whether that is you imagining it or you experiencing it. The body will respond the same way. You have expressed the frequency. And so the body chemically responds to that frequency. You will shift where your nervous system is vibrating. You'll move out of the sympathetic into the parasympathetic. You'll start producing different chemicals, allowing the body to repair itself, to digest, to create better balance and harmony. All because you imagined what it would feel like to be peaceful, as opposed to you worrying and feeling stress. When you worry, you have stressful thoughts, then you are sending signals to the body, oh, we need to be in the sympathetic nervous system because we don't know what's going to come. We need to be in a defensive posture. And so you aren't using your energetic resources to heal the body. You're not using it to gain nutrients. You're staying on high alert so that you can run away if you need to, or fight if you need to. So it has a massive impact on your body, and science understands this now. So the more you can imagine that and sustain it, the more that impacts the physical structure, the more you're pulsing that out, and the more you're going to see that reflected back. You'll see more peaceful people around you. You'll have more opportunities to experience peace in your reality as you start to keep coming back to it and expressing it again and again and again and again and again. Practice makes perfect. This is a game of mastery. Mastery requires repetition. And if you've created something and you think, oh, why is this lesson coming up again? It's because you're learning to master it. Hopefully every time it comes up, you recognize it faster, you shift out of it faster. And eventually you're not going to need it at all. You'll just say, oh, this again. Okay. And then that'll be the last time you have that lesson because you've mastered recognizing the frequency and moving out of it. You now recognize the positive end of the polarity, but you're not attached to the positive end. You're just exploring the positive end that keeps you in flow. Make sense?
A lot of sense. And you said this is a game of mastery. I'm curious to know, what has the Pleiadian collective mastered that you're teaching in that way right now?
Well, we're masters of frequency. We're also, we're keepers of frequency, keepers of time. Time is a marker for frequency. And so that's our expertise, is helping you find specific resonance.
And you can time travel in that way? How do you see it?
Yes, because we don't experience time the way that you do. To us, it's just a marker for frequency. But we do kind of oversee time, because time can there are beings who can time jump, move to different now moments. And when they start entering into these now moments, they can create distortions, as they really don't belong in those timelines because they aren't having a progression. They haven't incarnated necessarily into that system. And when they start jumping in and interacting, it can create distortions. And so we do monitor that. We help to make sure that these distortions are localized. So if it does happen, it doesn't happen through multiple timelines, if you will. It may only happen in one timeline.
When you say keep the time or monitor the time for these beings, in what ways do you monitor them?
Well, it's just observing if there are distortions that are created, because remember what we were saying, there is a natural pattern with geometrics and harmonics. And sometimes when beings are not incarnated into a system, they've just decided to go and explore a specific resonance, they can create tremendous disruption. And it doesn't just impact one or two. It can impact an entire civilization. It can have ripple effects that are very distorting. And so we try to monitor that and try to work with resonance to bring it back into those natural patterns of energy, so that it's stable. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Sort of. Yeah. I just want to say, as you can tell, I'm feeling very curious today. We could keep going on forever with these questions, but I want to be super respectful of Wendy's time. And I know that we talked about doing this activation. So if there's anything you'd like to say before going into it, I'm super open to receive, as well as whoever's tuning in today. I'm sure.
Well, we're very grateful. We're very, very grateful to you. That we have the opportunity to do this and to share this. So for those that are not familiar with the language of light, it is a source language, and it's comprised of light, sound, sacred geometry, and information. So there are carrier waves that are included in the frequencies that you are receiving auditorily. And then also we're sharing a galactic light code, which is the written form of the language of light. And really the difference is, think about somebody reading a book on audio, all right, and giving you the information, and then you reading the words on a page. It's just a different way to receive. And so that's why we're presenting it in two ways. So if you're looking at the code, you can gaze at it, keep your eyes open if you want while you receive the activation, or you can look at the code, close your eyes, and then just pay attention to what's happening in your body as you receive. So it's up to you. And the language of light is understood by all life in the universe. There are different dialects of it, shall we say. It's a bit like hearing English spoken in Ireland or Scotland as opposed to the United States. You still understand it. There may be slight variations in it, but you still get it. And it speaks to you, the divine being of light, having this physical experience. So there's nothing that you need to know or do with the ego mind. And it's not that the language of light is doing anything to you. You are receiving a manual, if you will, a reference point for a frequency, and then you are altering your own field to match it vibrationally. So that's what's happening. It's like someone asking you to sing the note of C. Most of you don't have perfect pitch and it can be very difficult. But if somebody plays the note on the piano, you say, oh, this note, I know this. All right, no problem. I can reproduce it. So we're presenting you with that and you can move your energy field to it. Now, typically what we recommend is that you work with it 3 times a day for 3 days in a row, because that gives you an opportunity to become familiar with the subtle energies. It's not a hard and fast rule. You can work with it more or less. You can come back and watch the video, or you can imagine connecting with this moment again. It's recorded in your energetic field. It's bookmarked. All right. So that will help you to attune yourself to the frequencies. Now, there are 2 that we want to do. One is for connection, that you establish a greater connection with yourself. And as you have a greater connection with yourself and source energy, all of your external relationships will be a reflection for the one that you have internally. It's really important. Some of you are trying to go outside of yourself through another person to get to source energy. This is your codependent relationships. If that person walks away, my life is over. No, your connection with source is inside. And if you have a healthy relationship with yourself, you will have a healthy one with others. They are a reflection of that relationship. But the connection activation is meant to help you to connect with yourself and with source energy, and then to be able to connect with nature and with those around you. All right. Then we also have integration that we're going to do. And integration is about you letting go of judgment, that something's good, bad, right, or wrong, letting go of those programs of lack, limitation, and separation, and bringing yourself back into that heart-centered space. So that will help you with that. So we're going to start with the first one here. Take a nice deep breath. This is connection, and we'll see where we go. Hishkoto ade biri biri kata berjukata patkatai hita ar berjukatai ide berjukata patkata ata ar berjukata patkata ara menesa sakatara amakotori imeneji di biri biri kata berjukata patkata hado ole mene biri buri berjukata patkati berjukata patkata berjukata anda alle biri biri kata berjukata patkata anda kala ele me katara imakataru uri imene kata berjukata patkatai hasa dure biri berjukata patkati ita ar biri berjukata patkatai I da de juji biri berjukata patkata hada ar berjukata patkata hissa ala mana berjukatai itakatara amatkatura imanakati de berjukata patakata hasakati ibra. Take a nice deep breath. Hissa to or berjukata patakati ida de iza zozo or berjukata patakata ita ara akatari imanakatari berjukata hasakati ibra arakatai. All right, take another nice deep breath. Now we're going to work with integration. Indo oro imena kataire ikatara ikatu ori imakatai imere beresha nakatare imakatara ukolo orakai iber arre berejukata patakati ikatare mekatai irumbere iberakata hakala or katari limena katara ibirkata iku ukora arkate hasa ore berejukata patakata ar berejukata patakati ida ar berejukata tata ida ar berejukata anda katari imakati ar berejukata da isa sa hisha to ar berejukata patakati hida armene isa. Take a nice deep breath. We've got one last round for you. Isu toto ar berejukata 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 patakati berejukata patakata kor berejukata akolo mane berejite berejunda way barai da dalele wara berejukata azo way mere berejudo do re mere berejukata ore berejukata patakata he's on the way berejukata patakata berejukata ar berejukata handa kore mere berejukata patakata hatakata ur berejukata patakata berejukata patakata atakar berejukata patakati ita arkata. All right, take another nice deep breath. So you may have noticed that the energy shifted as we went through. And that's because there were many different beings from different star systems who were blending the energy together to make this transmission. And encoded in the transmission is their manual, if you will, and how they integrated the very issues that you are working on. And so that's why you might notice that the energies may shift. Some of you may feel a lot, some of you not so much. And it's going to be different every single time that you come back and listen to the activation as you connect with this energy. Sometimes you are a vibrational match for the energy already, so you don't feel a big shift. Sometimes your energy is way out of balance and it's a big stretch, and you might go up a couple notches, but you don't really have that breakthrough yet. So think about an airplane taking off and it's a rainy day. The plane is ascending, it's going up, but it hasn't broken through the clouds just yet. You think you're still experiencing the same frequency, even though you've gone up. But be patient with yourselves. Honor what your bodies ask you for as you are working with this material. It is a piece of spiritual technology, and it is a living language, which means that every time you connect with it, there are different pieces of information that will open to you based on the frequency that you're in. So there are new pieces to discover every single time in terms of the transmission that you are receiving. All right? So unless you have any other questions for us, we'll go ahead and we'll wrap it up here.
Not at all. Just wanted to acknowledge you and thank you with so much gratitude for the space that you share with us, for your contribution and love for humanity. From the heart, thank you so much for all of the wisdom, the knowledge that you're bringing at this time. It's really, really, really appreciated by all of us. Thank you so much.
Well, it is such a pleasure. And we would say the same to you with much gratitude for the service work that you are doing, because you reach so many and your heart is so pure. So we will leave you all here. Feel free to connect with us directly. You don't need Wendy. Just ground, heart center yourself, ask your question and listen. So until we hear from you, we are watching, we are waiting, and we are sending many, many well wishes. All right.
Welcome back.
There's the keys.
How are you feeling? Feeling?
I'm always a little spacey after those.
I think that was one of the deepest ones that we've done in terms of the directions the conversation went with the P's. Wow, that was, the questions just kept flowing in for me, and I was like, at one moment I had to stop myself and be like, all right, Wendy needs to come back, you know.
Thank you.
Yeah.
No, I know, it's amazing when you open up that space in that container, the questions that pop up and the things that you thought were important questions, the moment you go back into the heart-centered space, you realize they don't really matter. And it's amazing when that happens.
Yeah, they were talking to me at the end about how they are keepers of timelines, and if there are certain incursions of beings that are popping in and out of timelines, they're like guardians of time in that way. It was super, super interesting. I don't know if you've received any other insights around how they do that and their role in that.
I know they work with harmonics with that. To kind of reharmonize, and they're showing me like gossamer threads. It's like almost like weavers. They will work with sound and light to kind of reweave and create a more balanced underpinning. Think of it like an underpinning.
That's so interesting. You use the word weaving, because that's what I call these conversations. We're weaving together this transmission, this information, helping humanity in that way return to that natural rhythm, which was also a huge theme in what we talked about with the P's. Awesome. Yeah, for me, it's kind of like a lucid dream. I don't remember all of it. And it fades pretty quickly. So there may be bits and pieces I remember. Yeah. You get some visuals, right, during the channeling?
I do.
Sometimes?
Yeah, because, and we all do, because the words might come out. And the example I always use is that it's a nice day, but there's all this other information that comes with it. It's 70 degrees, there's a light breeze, the birds are chirping, the grass is green, you can smell roses in the air. And I mean, there's all this data that's available when we go back into that multidimensional space. But all the ego mind would hear is, it's a nice day. So when we're in that space, we receive all of that and that knowing. So we might see visuals, we might, all of a sudden it might spark something else in us. And that's because we've opened that container. We're in that heart center space.
How limiting is language when you enter those spaces?
It can be very limiting. Yeah. Yeah. And some things are hard to express in language. It's very interesting to me. Sometimes they will use a word and my ego mind will go, well, wait a minute. I'm not sure what that word means exactly. Be a word that's not in my day-to-day vocabulary. And then I'll go look it up later. And I was like, well, I guess they did use it correctly. But we are limited by words and how we can represent things, how they can share concepts. We're in a limited container, in the 3D reality. That's it. We're in a container. There are walls. And when we get in the heart, like I said, sometimes things that we thought were important, it just goes away because we realize that it's a non-issue. It's not really who we are. It's not important. The important thing is that we focus on maybe a higher resonance or shift a perspective to something different.
And it's also how those messages make you feel, right? Because it is an energetic transmission through tone and sound as well.
It is, but sometimes it can make us not feel great because it might trigger something in us.
Yes,
that needs to be healed. So, I've had this visceral response, and that's what we have to pay attention to. That's where the gold is, when you can start to recognize where you feel triggered and activated, where you feel like you're going into contraction, because that's the piece that you've got to look at. That's where you're running a program of lack, limitation, and separation. Otherwise, you stay in that heart center space and you're just in flow. So if you can begin to recognize that and take the time to analyze that, to kind of step back and say, okay, well, what really got triggered in that moment, in that conversation I was having? Oh, I didn't feel safe. And you can kind of look at that. All right. So give yourself permission to feel that. What does that energy feel like in the body? Where's it sitting? Is the body hot, cold, numb? Is it buzzing? Are you expanded? Are you contracted? And then what emotion was it? Was it grief? Was it sadness? Was it anger, frustration? All those feel different. And then what's happening with the quality of thought? Is the mind active? Is it quiet? Is it positive? Is it negative? And just observe without judgment. And that will allow the energy to continue flowing so that you can transmute it and allow it to complete. Energy was always meant to be passing through. It wasn't meant to be stopped. So when we don't like something, we clamp down on it in that fear, that energy gets trapped. And it doesn't matter whether it was something that happened 10 years ago, 30 years ago. When we start to access that frequency again, every instance of the suppression of that energy throughout our life can come up and be processed. That's why it's so important to give yourself the opportunity to really feel whatever's coming up. And then once you've done that, like I'd say about 45 seconds is about the longest most of us can hold on to it, because it starts to dissipate. If we're holding on to it longer, it's because we're getting lost in the story of what happened, or we're trying to project to a now moment and make sure that it doesn't happen again. And we can't really do that. All we can control is the energy in the now. How am I responding now? How do I choose to respond? So once we've done that, then we reset. What do we want instead? All right. So if I'm not feeling safe, what would it feel like to be safe in my body? How would that feel? How would that sit? And start to pulse that energy out so you can get that reflection back.
And using our imagination, as the piece said as well. The body doesn't know the difference between an external experience with an internal experience. So I really needed to hear that, especially I think as a man. We have all these emotions, but we're taught to just put them under the rug and not think about them and keep going, taking actions and actions and actions. So I think it's a really powerful message, not just for myself, but for anyone out there that has struggled with these emotions in the past.
They'll keep coming back until we give ourselves permission to feel them. That's the crazy thing. So it's, do you want to stay in that pain cycle for 20 seconds or 20 years? It's up to you. That's what the guides say. So, and some people really struggle with the I am statement. They say, I am safe. I am safe. Well, that might work for a few seconds. And then the ego mind gets activated and says, no, I'm not really feeling safe. This is happening and this is happening. But if you say, I wonder what it would feel like to be safe, the ego doesn't get triggered in the same way, but you're still putting yourself in alignment with that frequency. And so that's being pulsed out, whether you use the I am statement or you're curious about something.
Beautiful. And Wendy, as you know, we end every episode with a segment called The Final Trio. Just some questions we like to ask at the end. But before that, where would you send people to connect with you, with the work that you're putting through, anything upcoming that you have going on? Please feel free to just share with us where to find that.
Yes, you can find more information over on our website at higherfrequencies.net. Every month we have a group session. We also have our monthly membership, which includes activations and galactic light codes. And then I will be in West Virginia in November. I think the weekend is the 14th through the 16th. And that's for the channel panel. I'll be on stage with some amazing, amazing channels. So I'm really excited about that.
Quite a lineup in that event. So we'll definitely put a link below and everything else that you just mentioned down in the show notes. For these final questions, they're really just personalized to the guest. The first one I wanted to ask you is, after these decades of work, what core teaching that you've brought through has had to have been radically updated as the collective matured?
That's a hard one. I think the subtleties in the conversation we have around the process of manifestation, I think they've really kind of drilled down into the subtleties over the years. And it's not so much that things have radically shifted, because their core message has stayed the same the entire time. But I think we're getting down to the nitty gritty here. And we're looking at it that way. At the very beginning, it was really important for them to help people to open up, to see that we were part of a greater existence. And so they talked more about other star systems and how universal laws and things like that. And once people were open, then it was like, okay, well, that's great. Now we got to look at the inside and deal with how, the frequencies we hold affect all of that and affect the world that we create and generate. So their shift has changed a little in terms of how they frame the conversations. But I think now we're just looking at more subtleties in this same conversation.
It seems like they're just teaching us how to be the empowered creators that we were born to be. So that's a super powerful message right now for all of us. And the second question I have for you is, if someone comes back to this conversation years from now, what messages do you want waiting for them when they come back to it?
Well, I think they're going to get a different message when they come back to it. I had an experience with someone back in the day when I did private sessions. Somebody came for a second session. And the first thing they said to me was, I had a session before and I hung up the phone and I didn't think it was very good. Of course, I'm thinking, well, why are you back? And she said, then I listened to the information 3 months later and I was like, huh. And then I listened 6 months later and I was like, okay, there's some stuff in here. She said, I listened a year later and I realized you answered every single question I asked. I just couldn't hear it. So, I think what they share has so many levels and layers to it that when we listen back to it, there's always something new that we can glean from it. They talk about the activations being a living transmission, but I think the work that they do and what they share, that's also a living transmission that, depending on where you show up, you're going to hear something different. You're going to be able to access another level of that multidimensional information. But I hope that people hear that they're seen and they are loved and appreciated. And they're so much more powerful than they think they are.
Beautiful. Thank you. And the last question I have for you today, Wendy, I know it will not be our last together, but for today, what step can someone take today to live all that we talked about, not just hold it intellectually in their mind after this?
I think really going back to basics. So if you can today, just decide if there is a frequency that you want to experience, whether that's connection or safety or peace, love, whatever it is. Just take a few moments to imagine connecting to that energy before you get out of bed in the morning. Take a few moments to decide the frequency that you want infused into your day instead of reacting to the world around you. Set the tone before you even get out of bed. So even doing something as small as that can have a big impact.
So powerful. Wendy Kennedy, thank you so much for your light, for just making yourself available to these types of conversations. I know how much it takes and how much energy and how much traveling you're doing. So I hope really people can acknowledge what you're putting in as service for humanity. And I see that. I acknowledge that. I'm super grateful for you, this collaboration, this friendship, sending you so much love. And I can't wait to do this again very, very soon. Hopefully we don't wait as long as we did this time around.
Oh, well, thank you. I'm really honored to be here and to know you and to be able to share time with you. So you've got such a big heart and the work you do is amazing. So thank you.
I appreciate you.